to Ada again, either I was going to get in or I was going to commit to getting a college degree. One of those two things. And so the second time I applied to Ada, it was magical. I spent the entire time absolutely convinced that I was not making it in. And so the day I got the email from Kariga, I jumped off my bed and screamed, and then figured out how to pack an entire life, minus my partner, into 3 suitcases and move 2,200 miles across country. So that's how I came to Ada.
As in you didn't pack your partner in a suitcase.
As in my partner is still 2,200 miles away from me.
All right, so the next question is, how did you prepare for the Ada program? Including like the application process and getting here, getting mentally prepared.
How did I prepare for Ada? So I had been doing social work, housing stuff. I managed 3 low-income housing buildings, which was a joy and I really loved. I think the biggest thing I did to prepare for Ada was to save what money I could, because I knew that for a good portion of the year, while I wasn't going to be paying for school, which was a huge thing and really made it possible, I wasn't going to have a job. Ada is Monday through Friday, and you're in the classroom for 8 hours, and that's if you get there right at the beginning, you leave right at the end, which is generally not what I did. I got there a little bit early. There are activities in the evening, there's homework, there's oftentimes hackathons or other interesting events on the weekends, all of which are super useful, but there is just no way to additionally work. So I saved what I could. And then in terms of like preparing for the application, I was also in the group that did the video, and I've heard some people, I don't believe that there's a video anymore, is that correct? Okay, so don't worry about that. I won't even tell you about it. In terms of the actual application though, filling out the application and going in and doing an interview and all that, I tried to find out what I could about what the application process was like, but mostly I was like, what kind of brain teasers can I do to kind of try to prepare myself? And in the end, the most useful thing that I did above all was to practice telling people what I was thinking. So if you are doing a puzzle or you are working through, really anything, cooking, you could explain what you're doing as you're doing it, why you're making the decisions you're making. That's what Ada is looking for, is how you think, why you make the decisions you make, because that's what's going to make you a good programmer. And there's lots of things to learn. Obviously, that's why we go to Ada. But that, like how you think about things and how you explain what you think is really the most important thing. And that is not, even for someone like me who really likes to talk, is not easy. It is really difficult. So practicing that was the most important thing.
For the application process, I did very similar things. I practiced logic problems. I also practiced, but not necessarily for the application process, but when you go to if you happen to get to the interview process, I practiced basically just mock interviews with family and friends. That definitely helped for the interview process. As far as preparing for Ada, my biggest preparation was moving here to Seattle. I originally lived in Hawaii, so it was quite a trip over here. I was lucky enough that I had a friend here who had actually just moved a month before I moved out here, so I was able to stay with her. But I believe there's plenty of support systems here for people who want to move here, who don't know anybody here. So don't let that be an obstacle in your way of applying to Ada. It has pretty much changed my life, so I would definitely say please apply, even if you don't happen to live even in Washington. Like, please apply. And that was pretty much my biggest hurdle, was moving and just doing everything. I had a month to move out here, so just getting everything in order, and then also finding a place that I could London. So
I think the biggest thing for me was not to give up. I applied several times, and one of the first times, directly after applying, didn't get in. I remember thinking, man, that is really not cool. I'm gonna have to take a moment. I took a moment. I gave myself like a weekend to feel bad, and then I started looking at programs of, you know, what can I take online? What classes can I do? What have others done? And so I highly encourage you guys to Google. Like Google has, you know, we Google all the time, all the time. And I feel like in the process itself of doing these applications, like I became better at searching out how to solve things. I had never done anything with Excel, and after applying, like I can now write functions for you know, sorting data. So I think not giving up, finding joy in, I guess, the process of trying to take in new things, ask questions. You can, I'm sure a lot of you have Googled before, you know, ADA students, like we are reachable. I know I'm on Twitter. I know not just myself, but several other ADs are available. And I know I asked questions of the previous cohort, and I encourage you guys to ask questions of, you know, yourself.
I decided to, well, when I started to apply, the application window wasn't open yet. And so what I did is I went and bought this book called JavaScript for Kids. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to see, while working a full-time, stressful job, would I still take my Saturday and sit in front of a computer and code? And then I would like look up from my computer and it would be dark outside. And I was like, I guess I could probably do this. So it did a couple of things. It proved to me that I had the stamina to learn something. I had initiative to figure something out on my own, and that I was interested in it, and that I could do the work. And so I think that was really important. And then also what Tricia said is to not give up. When I was in the process of my making the first part of the application, I messed up. And I just had to put my head down on the desk, and I was gonna cry and feel bad for myself. And then I realized, no, I really want this. So I'm gonna give myself 5 minutes to cry, and then I'm gonna wipe it up, and then I'm gonna finish this. And I did. And the process of the application, I became prouder and prouder of myself, simply just applying. So know that. So by the end of it, I was like, I totally want to be at ADA. It's the place for me. But even if it doesn't happen, I'm so proud of myself just for applying. And it gave me a boost in what I felt I could do out in the world. So know that.
So I think I did 3 things to get ready for ADA that I think are super important and that we haven't really talked about yet. And the first one is that I cleared my calendar of commitments. If it wasn't ADA or sleep, it's not on my calendar anymore. The reason for that is not because those are the only 2 things you'll do, but because if you come into ADA with a ton of prior commitments and a ton of things that you're like signed up for already, you'll miss out on awesome opportunities. I had an opportunity to play with the HoloLens the week it was released, like dev kits, because I didn't have a commitment that weekend, so I could sign up for a hackathon. The second thing I did, sleep is sacred. I sleep 8 hours a night, and everyone knows that unless the house is on fire, you don't bust the door open. Your application is gonna be just as hard as the work you're doing in ADA because of how the difficulty curve goes. Like, they're always one step ahead of you. Sleep while you're during the application period. It'll help your brain a lot, and it'll get you in the habit for when you come to ADA. And the third thing I did is, as soon as I knew I was gonna apply, I gathered up a bunch of people in my life who were capable of telling me that I am pretty smart and talented. And every time I was ready to cry, I texted one of my friends and I said, okay, you have to call me and you have to tell me that I'm pretty smart and talented until I'm not gonna cry anymore. My best friend logged probably 20 hours on the phone with me during that 4-week period. But having someone outside your head to tell you that your doubts are wrong is really, really helpful. You will sometimes get so spun up in your own feelings that you can no longer objectively see what's going on. And the best thing you can do then is reach out to someone and say, hey, I just need a reality check. Can you tell me that I'm doing a good job? So I would say those things all started in the application period and have gotten me through this far. You're getting me through capstone right now, so yeah.
Oh, sorry.
This question is for Jamie. Can you give us a rundown of the ADA curriculum and what a typical day is like at ADA?
Sure. I can do that.
So the typical day will vary quite a bit depending on what stage in the program you're at. So now we do have this thing called Jumpstart, so you do have to do some work prior to coming to the onsite. That's just to ensure that, kind of get a taste for the stuff that you've been doing on site, and everyone's kind of on the same page coming in. Because some of you are very eager, and obviously have gotten programming books before the program, so it's good that everyone's on the same page before coming in. But we do spend the first week doing still like a lot of lectures. So even with the first part of the program, it's a lot more lecture heavy. That being said, usually the mornings are set aside for those lectures, and then the afternoon typically is set aside for working on exercises that go over the lecture that just happened. And again, that's ideal, but we always kind of mix in some other like fun activities, or we also go into like social justice lectures. So you kind of vary, but again, it is very much more lecture heavy in the beginning part. And then as you continue through the program, we start to introduce more projects. And as you get those projects, you get a lot more time to work on them. And that can vary, it kind of starts off little by little. So you start off getting maybe like an afternoon for a project. And then you get like a few days to work on a project. And then eventually as you go through the program, you get like a couple weeks. And by the end, like right before your internship, you have a whole month to work on your capstone project. And that capstone project is a project that you pitch. You decide the technology you're going to work on. And again, so you're not restricted to the technology that we teach. In fact, you're encouraged to try something totally new that we have never taught you. And you kind of, and that it could be something that nobody on site even knows. So by that point, our aim is for you to be able to teach yourself. So we like to go under the principle of teaching you how to learn. And again, Google plays a big role in that. And you'd be impressed with what really good Googling skills can do for you. So yeah, then you do your capstone by the end. So that's like the last month, so like 5 months after you start your onsite, and right before you get into your internship.
Right. And this next question is for Cynthia. How can an applicant increase their chances of making it into the interview phase as well as getting accepted into the program?
So on our website, we really talk about the target student that we have and what we look for. So, I hope if you haven't already, you read a lot of it, but a lot of us over here have already pointed out exactly some of the things that we actually look for. So on our online application, there's a problem-solving section. Some of those questions are very specific, and some of them are very, you could answer one way or another. And we certainly like to look at how you're thinking and breaking down the problem. So as detailed as you can be to tell us how you arrived at the answer, not only the answer, is important there. There's a set of essay questions that really get at why you want this career change, what you do to teach yourself, how you learn from mistakes, where do you see yourself going in a couple of years. And here we really like to look at why you love programming. So you hear stories about where did the time go and it's now dark out and here's what I did and I really, really loved it. And those are the types of things we really want to see. What did you do to expose yourself to it, and why did that really drive you? Why do you enjoy it? Because we don't expect people to have any formal training whatsoever, but we do want you to have tried it enough to know that you're going to want to do it a lot, because it's not always joyful. You are going to bang your head against the wall. We really want to know that you enjoy the craft. You enjoy learning from the mistakes that you're going to make, because that the whole profession is really about learning and teaching yourself. And we really want you to tell us about that and tell us what you think about that. Jumpstart is actually a great resource. We put that online for the following reasons. As Jamie pointed out, it really level sets everything, but it gives you a taste of how we teach and what we think is important. So it's not actually just about programming fundamentals. There's stuff in there about workflow. There's stuff in there about learning style. There's stuff in there about diversity and inclusion as well, which we recently added. It is a very important part of who we are and how we teach. And so there is actually an essay questionnaire about diversity and inclusion. I really encourage you to think about it. We do have an inclusion statement on site. Think about what that means to you. Think about how you would contribute to it. We spend quite a bit of time over the course of our curriculum, and we also work with our companies to really push that. And so we want you to be part of that. And so we want to see how you would contribute and help us move ourselves forward, make us better as an academy and as a place for you. So a lot of these things are just a couple of things to keep in mind. We do give you a coding challenge once you get to the next phase. Jumpstart pretty much has a lot of the basics for that. We tell you exactly what sections. If you can do a lot of it ahead of time, it really helps you. Well, one thing about Jumpstart is if you get through it and you love it, and you look outside and it's dark, and you still want to go on, you don't know where the time went, that's a pretty good sign that you might be really going into the career for you. So that's really also another very important reason we put it out there, is as a resource for you to really determine whether this is the right career for you. So use it as a resource to really dig into whether you really love the craft or not. And that coding challenge, we don't really care how long you spend on it. We care that you've really put in your best work in terms of working on it, understanding why you got it what you had. There is a lot of Googling that happens. You can expect that. I think, yes, not everybody here had a coding challenge because we followed the application process, but some of them have, and there is a lot of Googling, right? There's a lot of thoughtfulness that really went in to how that was produced. I have had applicants, when they've come in for the third interview, give me a sheet of paper and say, I did it based on the feedback. Anything that really shows me and shows a lot of our interviewers how much you love this, how much you are willing to put into it, is an important thing to show us and demonstrate to us, because that really tells us that you're really ready for this career transition as well. It is a very intense program, and so a lot of the things that people have said about how to prepare themselves also is an important thing to keep in mind. So.
Right, so this question is for Lauren. How has the transition been from your classroom time and that experience to your internship experience now?
So like I said before, classroom time is Monday through Friday in the classroom. You do, like was mentioned earlier, the very beginning of the time is a lot of lectures and smaller coding projects, all the way in that evolution to a capstone project that you're doing by yourself for 4 weeks. And teaching yourself a lot of things. And really the next logical step from that is your internship. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm interning at CenturyLink Cloud. We do cloud storage, and I'm working on the platform billing team. So we're working on the infrastructure. And a lot of the difference between being in the classroom and being in an internship is that an internship is like the real world. You are there, you are working on legacy code base. So instead of a project that at most, you have this code and it's been around at most for 4 weeks and you're about to turn it in. The code base that I work on has been around for 10 years in some parts. And not all of it has been around for 10 years. It's 10 years of people adding code on top of code. So some places it's a spaghetti of code, and what we're working on is taking little pieces of it and straightening that out. and it's production, right? That's another difference. You're working on code that at the end of this month, code that I helped write will run, and it needs to produce the correct billing for our customers, because our customers don't want to be charged too much, and our company doesn't want to not charge our customers, right? And so that's what I have the opportunity of doing as an intern, which obviously you don't do as a student. But as an intern, I also have the support to say, hey, okay, I've worked on this piece of code, and the people who are there, who have, my team is fantastic. I can't say enough great things about the guys that I work with. They are consistently supportive. They are willing to listen. From the very beginning, if I had something that I was like, I don't necessarily know, I was working in a new language. We work in C#. We don't do any C# in Ada. And I wouldn't necessarily know this specific language, but Ada taught me enough about how to learn code that I could say, I kind of understand this structure here. And to me, this piece of logic here doesn't make sense. And I could describe it well enough that I could make a contribution. And that was at the beginning. And now, 5 months into it, I can actually write code that is useful to our group, to our team. And so I went from being, you show up on the first day of your internship and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is like 10 years worth of code, and you guys are all senior programmers who seem so smart, to the point where I'm still like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I have a better idea of what I'm doing, and I know where to go to get answers, and I know who to talk to when I don't know where to go to get answers, and I know how to phrase questions, and I was able to take the persistence about getting a problem solved that I feel like I brought into Ada, but then I really honed in the classroom and really put that to work in an internship, which has made the whole, I'm right at the end of my internship, I've been applying for jobs, and it's made that process and explaining to potential employers hey, here's why I want to work for you, and here's the skills that I offer as somebody who 12 months ago did not know how to code, but I can be a valuable member of your team. And that's really what the internship does. It takes you from somebody who's like, I know how to write code, I did this, I've been doing this for 6 months, to not only do I know how to write code, I know how to contribute to a team. And that's really the most valuable thing about it.
And my last question is for Brandy. How has the transition been from your Ada internship to now working full-time at your company?
For me personally, there wasn't actually much of a difference. My interning company was SkyTab, and I decided to stay with SkyTab. So it was actually pretty smooth for me personally. I ended up doing pretty much exactly what I was doing in my internship. And I'd like to believe that's a good sign of a good interning company, is they're putting you in, they're integrating you with the team. They're putting you on work that they would have maybe a new hire working on. And that was, I was really, really glad to be working on stuff that about 2 weeks after I started, they had a new hire on the same team as me. And we were pretty much working on very similar things, very small sort of pocket projects to begin with. We were both ramping up about the same pace, and we got to work on bigger and bigger projects. The main difference between me and this new hire that was a full-time developer himself was that I sort of had a capstone at the end of my internship. That's not necessarily the general practice as far as I know, but my interning company decided that would be the best way to sort of wrap up my internship, is to sort of have this sort of final project that I would work on. It was actually the remodeling of one of their legacy pages. So I got to look at some of the older code and sort of deep dive into that, and then also deep dive into the newer code and try and follow the standards they had already put in place, and basically remake this old page into something that looked more modern. So that was my sort of final capstone of my internship. And then going forward, I took a 3-week break because I wanted to go back and see my family. So after that, I was a full-time employee at SkyTab, and again, I was pretty much doing the same work. I was working on projects with other people on the team. I was doing basically front-end work. I'm on the front-end web team. For other people in my cohort though, I've heard sort of the transition described a little differently, especially if they changed from their interning company to a completely different company. I've heard from some of my classmates that it's a lot like starting your internship over again. You're basically starting from page one, especially if you're going to a completely different programming language. Some people like switched from back end to front end and front end to back end, which is basically front end stuff is like the stuff you go to a web page and you see what the front end is what the user interacts with. The back end is sort of more database oriented. So some people switched very dramatically, and for them it was a lot like starting their internship over again. They had to basically learn a completely new stack, but they were able to bring some of the principles that they had learned from their internship over, sort of interacting with teams, and also you start to sort of see common concepts, and it just sort of gets ingrained into your brain. So although they described it as starting their internship again, it was also a little bit easier for them to get up and start running. So yeah.
Thank you. So we're gonna open the floor up to you all, as well as our Twitter participants. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand. I'm gonna pick you because you're closest.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how are students placed into their internships?
So we sign on companies for each cohort. Some of them take 1, some of them take 2, some of them take 3 or 4. And we have those companies come in and present to the students, and there are opportunities also for all the students to interact with the companies that they're most interested in throughout the first 4 to 5 months of the classroom time. We go through an interview placement process at around the end of the 4th month, maybe towards the 5th month, where basically a company has 1 spot, they get about 6 to 8 interviews. They basically interview 6 to 8 students. And each student interviews with about 6, 8, and so about 7 different places. And it's quite an activity that runs for a full week. It's very busy. But these companies are basically committed to completing your training. That's basically why they're here. They're supporting the mission. And for us, it's really at that point a matter of determining based on their feedback to us after they interview you, as well as your feedback to us about how you feel about the companies after you've interviewed with them. We basically try our best to do a best fit match at that point. It takes us a couple of days to crunch through all the feedback that we receive, and then we basically email a company and student and say, here's what we want.
I have just a question for Cynthia. We've heard a lot of stories, but I'm a designer, so this developing and coding thing is like very, very new to me. So I want to know, ADAs, do they want people who are interested, in learning, or do they want people who are already into a little bit of coding?
I want you to be interested in coding. However way you get there is up to you. And we believe that in order to really be very sure you're interested in coding, you probably should try it. Try a little bit of it. We provide Jumpstart precisely because it's a good way for you to try. But there are all sorts of resources online, various meetups actually that go on all through Seattle that give you the opportunity to actually try it, learn more about it, speak to those who've actually also tried it and are now getting into it. Don't expect you to have taken like a full-blown class or anything, but I want you to know that you want to do this. However way you get there, that's your choice.
Hi. I'm wondering if any of you can speak a little bit more about the social justice curriculum or component of the training.
I would love to talk about that. It's one of my passions.
So I didn't mention this in my introduction, but I'm a pop culture and social justice blogger as well. And coming to Ada, they said online that they did social justice curriculum, and I was excited about that. And then I got into the curriculum, and I got really excited because our very first social justice class is on the concept of intersectionality and why we all have some privilege and we all have some oppressions, and we need to be careful about where those places overlap with our fellow students. And that was the basis from which everything else is built. And we talk about stuff around advocacy for yourself as a woman, or advocacy for yourself as a person of color, or advocacy for yourself as a non-binary gendered person. But we also talk about things that don't get talked about a lot in social justice, like poverty, which if you come from a poverty background, tech is a huge shock. I grew up in subsidized housing on food stamps, and I still have little freakouts when I go to meetups and there's a ton of free food and it gets thrown away at the end of the night. I panic about that. And our social justice curriculum was the first time that anyone ever addressed that I might have that kind of discomfort in the workplace and opened up the floor so we could talk about it. And my classes talked together about ways to deal with things like that. These organic conversations come out of the curriculum, and a lot of us have been pushed to become greater advocates because as we become more aware of these things and we see these gaps, we realize that we have the power and skills to make a difference. And so I would say that my favorite part of the social justice curriculum is that now I feel empowered to advocate for myself and my classmates and my future classmates.
This is for you girls. I'm wondering how you get over the fear. Okay, I mean, we start out thinking, oh, I can't do that, I'm too stupid. You know, I mean, we're told that, well, you don't want to do that. That's for people that are really smart. That's for the guys. How do you get past the fear of even trying?
Just keep coming back at it. You know, when I think the other thing that I was going to say that in preparation for this was Google, don't give up, but also be willing to ask questions. There was a point where I was in my social work position at a middle school, and I was like, there's this like opportunity to have like a 2 or 3 week little class on JavaScript, right? And I asked even though I knew that the answer could have been no, I asked my supervisor if I could have a leave so I could go explore this class. And at first she said, absolutely not, you cannot do that. That's like at the end of the year, you can't have to do that. I was like, all right, thanks, okay. And so I was trying to look for resources, you know, what can I find online? She actually came back like maybe 2 weeks later, and surprisingly, I was allowed to take that leave and to go take some time for this mini class. So don't give up, ask questions, seek resources. I think that this is a challenge that women and I should say I identify as non-binary, and when we're talking about social justice, I feel like I've been very supported at Ada, but having been raised as a girl and having the perspective from other people in society, I think we definitely get this, and there is the need to say to yourself that you can do it, that you are strong enough to do it, that you are capable enough to do it, and being part of the ADA network is incredibly helpful in this way. I have a whole network of people who both respect me for who I am and think that I'm a smart person. And so when I'm struggling, I can turn to them and say, like, I can't do this. And what I hear is, oh no, you can totally do this. You're completely smart enough to do this. And there is also something, I think, to see women who you know are incredibly smart struggle. So the other people in my cohort, the other woman and the other non-binary person, are some of the most intelligent people that I have ever met. And I got to go through 5 months of classroom where I watched them struggle. And then I watched things click. And I thought, if that person who is so smart is struggling, well, then of course I'm struggling, right? But if they can get it, then of course I can do this. And that is there's a thing about being part of ADA from this point where I'm sitting now, where I have a job I've accepted. I am like winding down my internship. I'm getting ready to go out into the real fancy world. I can say that yes, learning things at ADA is amazing. Learning how to code is great. Having gone to an internship is fantastic. But the number one valuable thing I've gotten from ADA is the network of people that I know are my support network, that I know are there, and that I can also contribute to. So having that network, and if you are not like currently in ADA, as everybody sitting here is, you can find that kind of network. You can go to these meetups. You can talk to us. We're all here for you as well. And know that, like, even if you're feeling like I can't do this, there are people who will help you, for sure, hands down.
One thing that just made me remember that when the first day I started my internship was probably the worst day because the entire day I was like looking. They sat me down at my computer after all orientation and whatnot, and gave me sort of this guide to go through to set up my environment on my computer. And several times I got to a point where it's like, I feel like I should know this. Why don't I know this? Can Google help me? And Google couldn't help me sometimes. And I was just like, oh gosh, who do I ask? Like, do I ask this? It's gonna sound really stupid. This is gonna sound really stupid. So you really just have to, it's really hard, but you have to basically bash down that voice that wants to tell you it's really stupid. This question is really stupid. Like, I think all of us experience that little voice that's like, oh, this is gonna be a stupid question, but I really don't know the answer, and Google's not leading me in the right direction. So like, it's a trial to try and get that voice to just sort of sit in the corner and stay over there. You develop, like for me, I had development strategies personally. Like if I find a question I think is kind of stupid, I might put it on the side and just write it down. And if I can keep going, I'll keep going. And then if I find another question, oh, this is kind of a stupid question too, let me put that over there. So like I build up questions and then I go to someone and I'm like, I have a couple questions for you. Can you please answer these questions? But yeah, it's just, you have to learn to kind of like, you just have to learn to quiet that voice because we all experience that voice, all of us. So it's not anything unusual, trust me.
Hi. So ADA seems like it's a really wonderful program for women who are trying to transition into tech, and it seems like because of that, it's also very competitive to get into. And hearing from some of you, it seems like there are women who are qualified that aren't going to be able to get in maybe the first time that they apply. So if that were the case, what would you suggest if you want to come back as a stronger applicant, or like other paths to get into this field that you would recommend if this doesn't work out?
As I said, when I moved here, I had a friend who moved here about a month before I moved out here. And me getting accepted into Ada really inspired her to she thought she could maybe follow in this path as well. So she applied to the cohort after me and unfortunately didn't get in, and I felt really bad, but she didn't lose heart. She decided that she really wanted to get into this field. She seemed really passionate about it, so she decided to apply some boot camps here in Seattle. So she applied to General Assembly and got into General Assembly and went through 3 months of General Assembly and graduated. And she was lucky enough to actually be hired as their TA for the next cohort. So she did that for a little bit. And then she went on to apply to a ton of different companies. I think that's one of the most difficult things about going to a boot camp that doesn't have an internship is just it takes real grit just to keep applying to companies and just keep applying until you get that interview, that callback basically. And she finally got an interview, or not an interview, she got a couple interviews, and she finally got a job here in Seattle. So she went through that process as opposed to going through Ada, and she's really happy right now. But it does take a lot of grit after graduating to just keep going and to just not lose heart. It's applying to jobs is really, really hard because, yeah. Because you have to polish your resume, and even if your resume is like shining, people will just turn it away for silly little reasons and no reason at all. So you just have to keep at it, and I think that's the biggest takeaway here.
So I think Ada is fantastic. Some of the smartest and definitely the hardest working people from my cohort were people who applied multiple times. I think that we think of programming as something that requires being incredibly brilliant. And as a programmer, I would like to think that it requires incredible brilliance, but really what it requires is tenacity. It requires the ability to say, like, no, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make it so that when you touch that button, a word appears. Like something little weird, like I'm gonna do it, and it's gonna take you a while, but you'll figure it out. And no one's gonna stop you. From what I can see, that's the most important thing. And so applying multiple times doesn't say anything. In fact, if anything, it says like you're the kind of person who's not gonna give up, which will make you a really good programmer. In terms of a non-Ada path, things that are important are like going to those meetups, going to hackathons, working on projects, have a GitHub account, put up your code. Even if you're like, I don't know about this code, it's not super great, put it up. Other programmers know that like not all code you put up is 100%. If you only put up code that was 100%, people would think that was a little sketchy because no one writes perfect code. So build your portfolio, go to hackathons, find something you're passionate about. Like I said at the beginning, when I was like, is this something I want to do? I took did a few little online courses around Objective-C, which at the time was the only language for writing iPhone apps, and I kind of cobbled together a little iPhone app. I didn't know at the time Objective-C is apparently a very difficult language, particularly to pick as your first language. Then for my capstone project, we don't do mobile development a ton at Ada. We definitely don't write in Swift or Objective-C, the iPhone languages. But I decided to do that for my capstone. Like was being said earlier, it's not a thing we do at Ada, but in your capstone you can do that. And I didn't do a ton of mobile development, didn't do any mobile development at my internship either, but I'm going to get to go and do some of that at my job. And so that is having that kind of like, even if it's not something you're getting from your formal education, finding what you're passionate about and building your portfolio around it is hugely important. And then networking. So when you're going to those events, meet people, say hi to them, make LinkedIn friends with them, or connections, or however LinkedIn calls it. Get to know people, work on open source projects. They're the kinds of things that will get you to figure out what it is that you want to do, and as well as who are the people you want to do those things with. And those people are gonna be who get you jobs.
I'm thinking a lot of resources. As soon as you asked that, I was Googling through my own brain about what are the things that I use. Because there's so many resources out there, and the more that you Google, the more things you can find. Codecademy, Treehouse, and I don't know if this is still true, but if you have a Seattle King County library card, you can get both access to that for free on Treehouse, and there's, not Ruby, but there's another one that you did. Linda, there you go. That will teach you other things. I think the other thing that I can think of is that I like to teach myself things, so I think I was in the practice and knew what type of learner I was and knew what things worked for me. And so if you start to try things and you're kind of watch yourself, I guess, analyze yourself and see what's working for you, and then kind of apply those things, I guess, in your application or in other parts of your life.
Hi. So like this process where you guys are learning and you're going through the ADA program, and you're in that learning process between like there or your internship or in the real world, can each of you share like an experience or a moment that was like either really challenging or that was like very rewarding and positive for you as you've gone through the process?
I've got one that's both, and it's from today. So as I mentioned, I'm working on my capstone, and one of the things my capstone does is make calls to an external API. And the number of times you are allowed to do that in any given hour is really, really small, it turns out. You think 1,000 is a big number until you use it up in 15 minutes. So today, I spent my day building a caching layer, which is a layer of my application that intercepts the API call and asks if I already have the data. And if I do, it doesn't call the API and use up one of my calls. And I came in this morning and I was like, okay, I'm building a caching layer today. This is the thing I'm doing. And I spent my entire morning reading Google and crying, and the crying was real. And I was like, okay, this is really frustrating. I'm about to flip a table, so I'm gonna go get something to eat. I haven't eaten anything since 7:30 this morning. I'm probably hangry, and that's not helping. And so I went for a walk around the block, and I got a snack. And while I was walking, the piece that was missing fell into place because I wasn't thinking about it anymore. All of those Google articles coalesced into a beautiful peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I came back from lunch, and I sat down in my super cushy beanbag, and I started tapping away on my keyboard, and 2.5 hours later, I had a caching layer, and it was the most exciting thing I've done this month. Because now I go look at the API page, and it says you haven't made any calls this hour. And that's such an amazing feeling that I was resource limited, found a way to deal with that limitation that was both efficient and skill building, and managed it because I learned how to teach myself. So that was my day.
Totally real. We use caches all the time on the platform page that I do on my internship. All the time. Managing caches is like thing.
Turns out Memcached doesn't like 30-day expiration.
The question was something that's been challenging and rewarding, I believe. Man, everything about Ada is both challenging and rewarding. Everything about programming is challenging and rewarding. It's the like you're building a thing And it is challenging, and that's partly why it's rewarding, is because it's so challenging. I know for me recently, the most challenging and rewarding thing has been this job application process. I sent out more resumes and applications than I would care to think about anymore. I did a number of interviews, and I did a lot of whiteboard practice. And just like learning to program, it's a skill, and you go out there and you practice and you learn and you think about what is it that you are trying to demonstrate. And then in the end, like being able to say, I have learned all of this stuff over the years, and I can demonstrate that, and I can go out and I can now have a job as a software developer. That is incredibly rewarding to be able to say, like, yes, like I am a software developer, and I can build these things. Yeah, that's been very challenging, but also incredibly rewarding.
Hello. So my question's on the career opportunities of ADA. It's kind of around the big picture, I guess, what the academy is trying to accomplish. I was wondering, usually when most people graduate, is their goal to become like a software developer or web developer, some sort of developer around that? Because what I'm doing right now, I'm currently an information security professional, and one of the goals, like one of the reasons why I want to code is because maybe one day I want to be able to do a penetration testing. So I just want to know, is that the main goal, is to become a developer, or can it be combined with something that you're interested in?
So we want to admit students whose main goal is to be a developer. That said, developer is a very broad term. One of my graduates works at the Seattle Times. She is one of a small team of developers that writes interactive media for the Seattle Times website. In fact, she worked on a recent project around race called Under Your Skin, if you have heard about that in Seattle. So there are lots of ways. One of my other graduates is now becoming a developer working with an arts organization in California. So there's many ways where you can be a developer outside what we would traditionally call software. But the whole purpose is actually for software to just be part of a lot of things we do. And so we want your goal to be a developer, but you can be a developer in many different broad ways. You can define that very differently. I think the soul of it is really that you want to build things. You want to build things to solve a problem, to have an impact on the world, and have an impact on society or culture, whatever it is. But you want to build something.
Hello, my name is Ashton, and I have two questions, if I can break the rules and do that, thanks. So the first question I have is for all of you guys, and I wanted to know, going into the program, you know it's a commitment for a year, and then I guess like a lifetime commitment to continue like learning. What would you say is the greatest like contributor to failure in the program and success in the program? And then my second question is that I've heard you guys talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and I wanted to know the company's stance or value on transparency as well.
Start with the second question, because that's probably a question directed for me, and then I will hand off. So transparency is one of our values. We like being transparent with our students and with our community about our state of evolution. It is not perfect. Even with diversity and inclusion, we have a lot to learn. We still have a lot to learn. We continually take feedback from our students. We continually train ourselves. we continually learn to improve ourselves in that particular area. Where I say we draw the line with transparency is when it comes to our students' privacy. And there is definitely a line there where we want to respect our students' privacy, and that's a line I will not go over. But things like why we decided to do X in this curriculum, why we made such and such decision about where the organization is going, are things that we are happy to be transparent about, as long as it doesn't violate any student privacy, any laws, any things like that. And I hope you all remember her first question.
I do. Okay, so greatest contributor to failure and greatest contributor to success. And I'm gonna say that these two things are actually really tied together. The greatest contributor to failure that I have seen is getting so bound up in your ego that you can't ask for help. I've watched people sit there and bang their head on a problem all day, and when they finally were able to get out of that place where they felt that they should know it and beating themselves up about not knowing it, they were able to ask someone for help and work through the problem on their own just by talking about it. So I would say that to be successful, you really have to just be open to the idea that you cannot know everything, and you have to get comfortable saying, you know what, I don't know that, I need help. And if you can't do that, you will not have an easy or good time.
As someone who's only 3 weeks in, I've ridden the roller coaster of, oh my God, I'm a god, I made that work. Oh no, I can't get it to work. Oh God, there's been a mistake. And I think that I would absolutely parrot what she has to say about persistence and being open to not knowing. And I think the word tenacious just keeps coming back. You have to have it in you that, you know what, I'm gonna learn this, I'm gonna make it work. And then also you do the same thing for your cohort, that you see others struggle, and the way you were supported when you were struggling, you offer that hand to others. So that's how you all end up being successful in the end. I think when we first started talking in our cohort, we had this, no 80 left behind thing that we said, and I didn't quite get it. I was like, oh, that's funny. But now in it, and I'm definitely a hard-headed person, like, I'm gonna figure this out myself. And so I've definitely come to learn those things, but one of the most important things is also being willing to support and offer help, as well as ask.
I would also pair that. I would add to that there's also, just hills and valleys. We've been there for 2 weeks and a day, and it's definitely up and down. There's I woke up this morning and I know how to solve this. I know about returns, and then by the afternoon you're like, wow, what is this whole new thing? So I guess being okay with that cycle and finding ways to support yourself, and figuring out how to voice that to others is helpful.
I'm totally reiterating what all these lovely ladies have said. Also, to reiterate something Cynthia said earlier, it really helps if you know this is something you want to do. It was something I was more or less sure I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to have a career in it, and that was kind of what Ada helped me decide. But I knew that I really did enjoy logic and, to a certain extent, programming. I just didn't know to what extent. And so I would highly encourage you to do the Jumpstart and just to get an idea of this is something I really want to do. But also sort of adding on to what everybody before me said, knowing that, basically not being too tied to your code. Going into my internship, you get to, during the classroom time, we also had code reviews. So basically, we had TAs reviewing our code. But also in our internships, we also, depending on the company, but most companies are gonna have code reviews as well. and not taking something personally. Like if a coworker comes in and is like, hey, why did you do this? Or like, hey, you could do it this way and it'll be a lot more simpler. Not being so attached to that code, being willing to change is a big thing as well, for me personally. But also be willing to defend yourself as well. Be willing to be like, hey, this is why I did this. If you're willing to give me some more explanation as to why you think I should do this other way, then I'm willing to listen, but this is my sort of defense of my code. So willing to basically listen. Basically willing to listen, but also willing to defend yourself.
I'm having a totally surreal kind of moment because I remember sitting in the audience at one of these information sessions, hearing people say things like, man, there will be a point at Ada where you think, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And I remember thinking, like, no, if I get into Ada, I'm just gonna love every minute of it. I don't know what I was thinking, but there will be a moment where you say, like, man, what the hell have I gotten into? I can't do this, right? I cannot do this. And I think what Ron was saying earlier about like having people you can call who will tell you, like, no, you can do this, and you do want to do this, because you know, my partner has heard me say more times than is probably okay, I cannot do this. And he has consistently been there. I'm very thankful for him to say, no, you can do this, and more importantly, you want to do this. Like you said many times, you want to do this. So like, I'm just gonna remind you that this is what you want to do. And that is like, yeah, it's a weird, very surreal experience. But yeah, having those people there, there to be supportive for you. I also wanted to say, I keep hearing us giving you this advice of like, be strong, but also be humble and like knowing your code. And, you know, like that you have things to learn, and like you have to be tenacious. And like there's so many things that I think you can hear this whole panel say, and it's very easy to say, well, that's not me. I don't have those skills. I'm not like 100% confident, and also 100% humble, and also like know for sure that I absolutely want to write code 100% of the time. And maybe there's occasions where I like look up and it's dark outside and I keep on a code, but sometimes like I just go like, I don't want to write code. I want to like play with my dog, and that's okay too. It's not, are you this perfect person? Then if you're that perfect person, you should apply to Ada. It's if you want to be the kind of person, if you enjoy building things, if you like, you've done some code writing and you like it, you're like, yeah, this is the thing. And you want to be a tenacious person, and you're willing to keep trying, and you're willing to learn all of these little things, Ada helps you with that. We talk about this stuff all the time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a program for perfect people. I'm definitely not a perfect person.
You know.
Yeah, and that's not what it's about. So it's apply because you like writing code, you like building things, and you want to do that. That's what you want to do.
And I just want to tag onto that like, it's totally okay if you're not a perfect person, like 60% of the time. Ada will get you there. If you're not a perfect person 85% of the time, but you're pretty interested in doing this and you know this is the thing you want to do, Ada will get you there. And it's okay to cry in the process. I cry like once a day. I'm also an easy crier. I cry at Hallmark commercials, so. But it is totally okay to come in and look at your teacher and go, you know what, this is really overwhelming and I don't know what's going on and I feel really like scared. So don't feel like we're saying that you can't be vulnerable. I think Ada requires vulnerability. Possibly even more than tenacity.
That is true. That is true.
Haven't gotten anyone else.
Hi, so I'm curious what it's like for those of you who left the Ada classroom and gone into your internships and the workplace. Just what that transition is like for you to go from being in this classroom that's nurturing, you can cry, and it's supporting to maybe not having that, or maybe you do. I'd like to know a little bit more what that's like for you guys.
Yeah, so it was quite a change. Like everybody said, Ada is super supportive, like just really supportive. But it's a very different situation. Like you're no longer, I mean, you are learning, but you're not focused solely on learning. In your internship, you're also working. You're also trying to produce products. So it's a little bit different in that your sole goal is not just to, hey, like I got this working, yay, like we finished this project, yay, oh, I learned the JavaScript and Ruby and all these new languages. So you're still definitely learning. I think that's also something that it was hard to come to terms with, because when I went into my internship, I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna be putting this all learning. I'm gonna be putting all the learning I've gotten from Ada to good use. And it really took a while for me to actually be productive. As Lauren has kind of mentioned, a lot of these companies' code bases are massive. There's just so many files. You can't even really wrap your head around it. So a lot of the learning wasn't about the language or like about the, well, it was about basically the framework and just how the company has tied all of these files together. It's quite ridiculous. So I think that was one of the biggest things, was just learning about this massive code base, but also not having that support system quite as much as we did have in Ada. We did still talk to each other. We do have Thursdays, every Thursday, or Tuesdays. Every Tuesdays we go into Ada and we were able to talk to each other. But we definitely had sort of these moments where it's like, I miss you so much. It's like, why don't we see each other more often? So you definitely make ties in Ada that will last beyond the classroom. Yeah.
So my internship, there's actually another AD from my cohort at CenturyLink with me. She's also on the platform team, but she is in a different sub-team. She's on the orange team, I'm on the green team. It's kind of like color coordinating. So we see each other, and she's close enough that I can shoot Nerf darts at her, which is important. And we talk on a regular basis, but it is, she's not like my day-to-day colleague. All of the rest of the people that are on my immediate 8-person team are men. When we started, they told us that we were the first female engineers that they had in their 10 years, which is impressive. Which makes the other woman, the other intern, the first woman, it makes me the first non-binary intern that they've ever had. And that is and for engineer, and that was very interesting. And but they were very committed. So the organization had said, hey, first of all, they want interns and they want Ada interns. So they have gone to Ada, they have talked to Cynthia, they have talked to Alexandra, and probably several other people at Ada. They have some idea of what they're getting into, but obviously not completely. But there are a core group of people who are very committed to your success and to you being there. My team is fantastic, and they the entire time been very committed to my learning. But it is a very different environment. Like I said before, I worked in kind of social work, where the dynamic is the gender balance is tilted more towards women. There's considerably more women counselors and social workers, and in software it is even more than the opposite. It leans heavily towards a male-dominated. But like I said, all of the guys that I worked with have been incredibly supportive, and have been very conscientious and have been very willing to hear feedback. And when I was doing my job search, these were also things I looked for. So I was looking at companies that had sponsored an ADA before, so people who knew about the ADA program. And if not, places that had gender diversity and inclusion statements, who, when I talked to them about what that process was like in the interview, people who were forthcoming, who were willing to talk to me about the pros and the cons of what it was like, and who were committed to change. So it's definitely a very different space than ADA, but I have found it to be incredibly rewarding space to be in.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm curious to see how has ADA evolved over the years in which each cohort, looking upon your peers and like your future peers come.
Well, for one, there are too many names and too many faces to keep track of now. So it's just there's more and more cohorts coming in, and it's just really hard to keep track of everybody. But what was the question specifically? Evolved. Okay. Well, ADA has actually done a great job of adapting over the different cohorts. Every cohort brings their own feedback and criticisms and suggestions to ADA, and ADA definitely takes them into consideration when they move forward to a new cohort. My cohort was very verbal about things that they wanted to see changed, and just things that they wanted, but just things that they thought would improve the program as a whole. So going forward, they were able to implement some of those things for cohort 4 and 5 going forward. And I add on to this, Cynthia? I don't know specifically, that's why.
There are lots of things we evolve from cohort to cohort. I mean, I would say if we step back and look at the bigger picture, first, as Brandy pointed out, there's just a lot more 80s. We're now on cohort 7. When I started a year ago, cohort 3 started, Brandy's cohort. So we've definitely onboarded, increased our capacity. We have a lot more staff now. I have 5 instructors now, which Jamie is, part of an instructional team, whereas when I started, there were 2 other instructors. So we've really expanded our companies. A lot of the companies that have joined us, just a really, really broad range, anywhere from companies that have 20-person development teams to a company like Amazon, which is thousands, can't count anymore. But I think one of the evolutions that I and many members of my staff are particularly passionate about is our evolving view on diversity and inclusion, which when ADA started almost 3 years ago, its mission really was about solving a gender gap. And we've realized that A, it's not just one gender, but B, even within that collection of genders, it's rich and it runs very, very deep. And so it is not, a lot of tech will talk about women. We'll talk about, there's a couple of white women in tech, but it just goes well beyond that. There's race, there's background, religion, language, everything. And a lot of that, it gets very complicated. And so we really have had to educate ourselves about the basic terminology of social justice, just awareness around gender identification, sexual orientation, race, and things like that we've had to educate ourselves, that we've brought to the classroom, that we've constantly involved, creating safe spaces, having discussions, because these things do happen. And I think the realization for us is this is a career transition for everybody that comes through Ada. And when you talk about a career transition, it's also your life. So you can't actually leave your life outside the door. You bring it in with you. And that's actually the real key value of what everybody that comes through our door brings with them. So why would we shut it out? You know, we have events all around the world that come into our classroom that we do need to talk about, that we do need to create spaces for, that we need to actually, I think one of the evolutions that we're going through now as well, how do we influence our companies a lot more? I mean, there's a lot of really great intention in those companies to be better about diversity and inclusion. Some of them are indifferent, some individuals are a lot more aware and able to deal with that, and some have the intention but don't know how to reenact that. And so I think as part of our evolution at Ada, I'm particularly excited about how do I start to influence that now that I think like actually a lot of them will listen to me. You know, how do we enable them to build a more inclusive environment? Not that we're experts, but we want them to go on this journey with us, to be honest, and a lot of them do want to. And so opening those discussions up with our companies, really helping them realize, no, this is not just about women. This is about the underrepresented. And you just have to understand it's very deep. Sometimes the conversations get uncomfortable. And every one person who's underrepresented is probably underrepresented in many different ways. That's why we talk about intersectionality. There are many people in tech that don't understand what that word means. And so I think as part of our evolution, it is part of our passion to actually not only really continue to educate ourselves, but bring that education to the rest of Seattle tech. And I don't even really believe it's isolated to Seattle. We do have 80s now that have gone beyond Seattle. We have a couple in New York, and probably a couple in the Bay Area soon as well. And so it is, for us, sort of just a bigger vision around eventually making the underrepresented not underrepresented.
I just want to add one student-focused evolution that came in just in time for me to capstone, which is that Ada has evolved, in addition to adding instructional staff, to add a mental health support staff. And that was an evolution that came out of the fact that repeatedly it came up that we need support that instructors just aren't capable of providing. And so Ada said, okay, how do we fix that? And they're really committed to continuous improvement on these issues. So if you have a problem and you articulate it, Ada's response isn't, don't yell at us. It's, okay, how can we fix that? And I think that's really important. And especially because mental health at Ada is a thing you will confront.
Have your hand raised.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm actually wondering, I have a strong idea of what I want to do. I'm a teacher now, and I really want to bring tech into underserved communities, like we're actually talking about Trish. I'm wondering if that's something that I know I want to work with. Do I have to, if I decide to change my mind, if I decide to go somewhere else, that's cool, right? That's something I can totally do. Maybe. And then I had one other thing that I was wondering about, kind of in conjunction with what you were just addressing. How do you think being a woman in tech, because you came from Microsoft, correct? So how do you think being a woman has informed what you've decided to do within the curriculum? Like, do you feel like you've made changes because you were a woman and were underrepresented?
We always have a teacher in every single cohort. Just to
There
put
are
that out
many
there.
teachers. There are many teachers. So your first question about whether it's okay to change your mind, yes. I mean, I don't expect people to just know what they're going to be, straight shoot 5 years and it's never going to change. You should always really ask yourself if it's the right thing for you to do. If you're asking me about, well, I was interested in this, and then as I went through Ada, I became interested in that. yeah, that's a fair thing to do. I'd rather you be honest with yourself and with us about what's changed. I do have a graduate who actually got offered as a software developer, decided she would prefer to be a technical program manager. And she's doing great right now. She's, you know, she said she's very, very happy. I do have some alumni who have thought about that career path as well. And, you know, I think it's a very valid thing to really ask yourself what you really want to do given where you are, and not force yourself to stay on a path that may not quite feel right. You may come back to that path after having explored some things, but be honest with yourself. That's a very important thing. As to how being a woman has influenced our curriculum, I like to think of it as really more a general question of how does being underrepresented influence the curriculum? And that is, I think, just a much broader question that we are still learning about and evolving constantly. And so we do look at how any one person can feel underrepresented even within the community that we have, but when you go out in tech, it's just like really amplified. You are probably underrepresented in so many different ways as well. How you deal with that. This is why we teach social justice, is why we to have these conversations about how to advocate about yourself. You know, how to advocate for others. Like, allyship is a very important thing as well. How to support each other, how to give and receive feedback. A lot of these things are important as part of being underrepresented, and then going into an industry where you are definitely going to be underrepresented. How can you advocate for yourself, but how can you also support somebody? How can you ask for support? And how can you get the support that you need?
I finished my undergraduate degree in psychology at Antioch University, and when you walk into the building there's a quote from Horace Mann who founded the school on the wall that says, "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity." And I'm not sure that being ashamed is really the correct feeling there. But in general, that quote has always really resonated with me. This idea that I have something important to do and I want to give back. And for me, that wasn't education, it wasn't being a teacher, but it was working in mental health services. It was working with homeless adults, which I did for 10 years. And I loved it. And I can say without hesitation that the hardest thing about going to ADA for me was not anything about technical or anything about career change in a skills way, but it was emotionally very, very challenging because both the way that I was raised and just the kind of person that I am, I feel very strongly about giving back to my community, and I was terrified of becoming a person who cared more about themselves and their tech salary and how cool they were than about giving back. And so I made a commitment to myself that I wouldn't ignore that part of myself, and that I was gonna try this path anyways. But if I found myself going that direction, that I would be, fully allowed to abandon ship because of what is most important to me. And I have found that tech is really a set of skills, right? So it is a set of skills that will let you do lots of different things. And I'm not even quite out of my internship yet, and I have already had the opportunity to, through a couple different both hackathons and projects with people that I know from housing and homelessness field, be a person who can lend my tech skills and help out. I got to help build a form on a friend's website who's doing a tour across the United States to highlight stories of homeless folks. She's gathering people's stories, and she was like, I don't know how to do this website thing. And I was like, I know how to build a form. Let me help you. It was not in the language I learned. It was in PHP. Not done any of that. It required learning a bunch of stuff. I shut her website down for a few minutes on accident, but I learned how to get it back up again. And it wasn't, it was that I had the skills to say, well, I can try this, and if I break it, I know I can fix it. I know I can do this thing. I feel like I am a better version of myself in many ways because I have said, not I want to be there, but I will hear what my values are, and I'm going to go in whatever direction helps me fulfill those values. So if you're committed to teaching and to education and to helping people, but you're also passionate about building things and writing code, and you're concerned that you're gonna end up like down some road where you're a software developer and you're far away from helping people, don't be, because it's like math, or it's like writing, or it's like music. They're all different skills, they're all different languages, they're all different ways we communicate. And writing code is one of those ways, and you can use that skill to do the things that you are passionate about, which is helping people. So I would say don't forget about that. I would also want to say something that Cynthia actually hasn't said yet, but which I've heard her say on a number of occasions, which is that it isn't just about like churning out a bunch of software developers. It's about helping underrepresented people get into tech and then supporting them while they're there. And I have no doubt that not only do I have the network of 80s that I can turn to and say, like, hey, I'm having this issue with such and such a tech thing, or I'm negotiating a salary, or I'm trying to decide what direction to take this, project. Not only do I have them to turn to, but I know that I have the staff. I know when I was looking throughout the program, I would sit down with Cynthia and talk to her and say, here's what I'm thinking. Here's feedback I have for Ada. Here's a concern that I'm having about what's going on. And Ada is very committed to not just like churning you out and sending you to your internship and saying like, good luck, you're on your own, but supporting you throughout your career. And if that means that you are using those skills in education, fantastic.
All right, so I'm gonna dedicate the last few minutes to answering some Twitter questions. So we got a question about a limit on the number of words, and I believe they're talking about the essay questions. And we do have a limit on the number of words that you can use, and I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's like 300 letters, maybe. This one now. 250? Okay.
250 words.
Okay, awesome. So it's 250 words. Thank you.
Condensing your down that small.
So our next question was, would someone with no higher education be a good Ada candidate, and how important is your resume? And I think I could answer this a little bit.
I'm just pointing that I have no higher education.
Exactly. So you do not have to have a higher education. I know quite a few of our ADs don't have a higher education. I would say most have a college degree, but that does not matter to us. You do not have to have like a college degree. You can have like a GED or a high school diploma, or like we don't really care. We just care about how passionate you are and how your drive, and if you could really work through this. Do you have the grit? Those are the things that we care about. And in regards to the resume, also, like, don't feel pressure. Like, if you have only been working in customer service, don't feel like bad about that, because again, like, we don't care. Like, I think there's good things that come out of working in customer service that we all know, that you have a lot of patience, which is a good thing. So yeah, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself on that.
Yeah, be honest. I mean, we welcome applications because of all the different backgrounds and things and careers that you've done. And so if I were to just enumerate all the different careers and things that all our students have done, it's pretty amazing, actually. It's just the different backgrounds people have. So just be honest. Don't put something down there that you can't talk about. Don't overclaim something. But definitely write down what you think we need to know about your background, where you come from, what you've done.
And then the last question was for the 80s. A lot of people apply multiple times before they get in. What do you think you could have done the first time to get in? So is there something you did your last time, the most recent time you applied, that was different from your first time that you think made a difference in your application?
I'll say that for me, probably the biggest part, and I don't know if everyone has this, but I had the same data question in my first application and my second application. And so when I did the second application, I looked at the questions and then I looked at how I answered them previously and was like, these answers are not detailed enough. I don't care if I'm right, but I need to write 3 times as much so they know how I got there. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that, as Lauren said earlier, being able to demonstrate how you're thinking and that you're following logical processes, even if you're not getting to the correct place, was probably the thing that made my application strongest.
So I applied multiple times, and I'm trying to think. I don't really know, but I know that each time, each iteration of applying, I learned something about myself and about like some new technology. I'd never used Markdown, and actually I started to take notes on things that we're learning in class in Markdown. And when I first started, I was so frustrated with the application. I was like, this is not working. I'm gonna plug in this. I'm gonna try this. So I think with each iteration, I learned a great deal of new things. You know, Ruby, Repellent. I don't know if that's still part of it. So just keep learning.
All right, and that wraps up our ADA info session. Thank you all for being here today. Our window is open right now for C7, which is going to start February of 2017. So odd. But it's going to be open. The first batch will be open until September 6th, and then our second batch will be until September 20th. So I know you've been given a lot of information, so you can look it over a little bit. You have until September 20th. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you.